Hi, I'm Frederick Weems, and I have a little cold, but I'm going to read a story that I wrote, I think, sometime in the 80s. I found the crazy old manuscript with its various cross-outs and alternate sentences, and I'm going to try to get through this with ease. I hope I'm loud enough for this video. In any case, it's about 13 pages. I think this will be about 6 or 7 minutes long. It's an unfinished story, and the final sentence is really a note to myself for, I guess, a plan of what I had for the story. Anyway, it's called The Way Out. I tend to think of myself, I think, as others think of me. Perhaps when it comes to me, I come to their conclusions before they do. My name is Mr. Stanforth, and you may call me an unemployed philosopher. I have money, if not to burn, at least to spark. I'm 25, a bachelor, and am, as I hope has been evinced, somewhat a bit opinionated. I live in the eastern part of the Republic, dividing my time between 2 apartments and a house, never traveling more than 200 miles from the safe harbor of that great concrete isle whose inhabitants 200 years or so ago fought against independence and 100 years or so ago rioted against preserving the Union. Do I seem a mite caustic, possibly slightly anachronistic? Well, suffice it to say I have no reason to make a living and barely a desire to make a friend. I love to watch the pageant. I love a parade. Okay, but my line traces beyond the invention of the word parade. It's vulgar. But I won't delay you in this day and age with my antediluvian mannerisms. I dare say you have Shoreham to protest in a half hour, or, if that would leave you feeling empty, a female mud wrestling match to watch. I will try to be brief. I murdered a person yesterday. Now don't go calling the cops or trying to bop me over the head. I only murdered in my heart. To think that I have the inventiveness required of a true murderer, well, you'd be thinking beyond reality. Your friend Mr. Stanforth is not only too lazy to take the life of a fellow mortal, he lacks the wherewithal. But then, why do I detain you? To make answer, in the first place, your presence is not boring me, and in the second place, my talking bores me much less than it bores you. Thirdly, however, I am fascinated with the method of the murder I did not commit. I hope to enthrall you with it. As I have said, I have 3 homes, 2 of them apartments situated within 3 blocks of each other, in Little Italy of all places, and one of them a house in Queens. Queens may be the place, but 1900 is the time, real country living, if but half a mile from poverty. I have a colleague in laxity, someone ordinary men would call a friend. Perhaps before I invited him he thought I was his friend. I would not have come to this conclusion, but it was at least a one-sided kind of friendship. Jackson is gullible. Unassuming is not the word, because the gullible are always assuming innocence is the fundamental trait of their tormentors. I called Jackson on the telephone. We have been acquainted since our mutual 19th year, which we spent at the same university. A blue blood he, and a blue blood me, and that year we connected just as the numbers I recently dialed connected with the bell in his telephone. He answered, "I'm not home right now," he said, and told me to leave a message after the tone had sounded. I did. "Jackson, if this voice is enough to clue you in on whose it is, take note. Come to my place in the suburbs, Friday, 10 o'clock. They're showing the big broadcast of 1938 on Channel 13. I haven't seen you in a month. Why are you such a ghost?" I felt no need to add anything. Jackson knows me. Sherman Jackson is, if I may be permitted use of the expression, good-natured. His face on the unfortunate side of equine reigns in what clumsiness might be in the rest of his corporeal being, for the latter is something an athlete might wish to sport. I say, his face reigns in the negligible clumsiness of his body, and expresses it magnified twists of his smile, absurdly darting movements of his eyes, which are panicking behind octagonal cuts of depression glass, vaguely blue in hue, wire-rimmed. That is Sherm Jackson, and more natural naturals cannot be. Oh, he has a certain type of wit. But how far can you go with self-deprecation? Pathetic, I always think when I think of him, and what I see is pathetic when I see him. Was I planning some cruelty when I left my message on his tape? I was genuinely interested in watching the big broadcast of 1938. No, I just wanted a friend to be there to enjoy the picture with me. Picture the two of us then, sitting in our chairs, laughing at the inane antics which soothed another era, eating hot buttered popcorn, which we really did that night. And believe me or not, his between-dialogue comments were more snide than mine. One thing I've observed in naive people, when you can tap the shallows of their expertise, for example, Sherm's genuine knowledge of old movies, you will find them expressing it in terms of contempt. This almost looks like part of that series of comedic death cries Paramount cried in 1934, Sherm said, his horse-like face plain and frank. It's farcical, as were they, and risque, like I'm No Angel with Mae West or Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers' most sustained comedy. But how ridiculous for a major film factory to try to make its main earnings off comedies, especially comedies about city slickers in the radio industry. With my mouth full of popcorn, I answered with, really? In fact, the Marx Brothers were wise enough to switch to MGM in 1935, although their brief fiasco with RKO certainly shows they could land in the wrong room, too. During this time, I didn't take my eyes off the TV, and with smooth ease left my face a blank. Of course, my point is Paramount could have made much better comedies if they'd spent their real money on women's pictures. They would have been able to afford less grainy film. They'd been making a good number of women's pictures since they almost went under in 34, but they still emphasized comedy too much. And if your comedies are going to be well produced, you have to sell tearjerkers like MGM's Grand Hotel. Of course, everyone knows Louis B. Mayer wanted to destroy comedy after Irving Thalberg, who'd resurrected it, died. But the good taste, money, and ability to mix love interest with humor. Now, if I had wanted to influence Sherm, I would, at this point, have said softly, I'd really like to hear what they're saying, Sherm, and he would have apologized and watched dutifully like the beaten horse he could be from time to time. But instead, at this special point at which I would have been doing nothing, things changed drastically on the TV, and Sherm interrupted himself to shout, "No, no, no!" He slammed the arm of his chair. "It's pledge night!" The movie had been stopped, and a youthless post-adolescent stared from the screen asking for donations to Channel 13. "This is so frustrating," Sherm said. "Every time they show something good, they have Pledge Week." His lower jaw protruded as he champed at the bit of panhandling, which now enraged him. Did you hope, when I first described Sherm Jackson as unassuming, that he would be likable? In vain you did, if you did, and oafishness does not indicate good intentions. The time is socially perfect. The murder is all in the heart. That was the last thing I wrote on there. I think a note to myself. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, even though I stumbled a bit. Thank you.